You jump off a low box just to help you take off, so Damien gets his foot down without going toe first.
It's a pretty basic expectation that one of the world's greatest track athletes should be at an indoor track now, training for the Tokyo Olympics.
Good. I really like the way you got your foot down on that one.
And yet, here's decathlete Damien Warner making the most of it at a far too small local London, Ontario hockey arena. The only place he's been allowed to train, unable to get access to an indoor track. To be clear, he's not complaining. To get this space, all this equipment took hustle and generosity.
So we'll do 2 10s, 2 30s, and a 40.
But some of this is less than ideal. Without enough track length, this is how he stops.
Everything is kind of a compromise in here, but I think it works at the end of the day.
As we sit here in this super cold arena, I'm thinking about American athletes and, French athletes and people who have all sorts of stuff available to them, including vaccinations. Are you worried that there is an added inequity, that once again the pandemic has created these big splits?
I follow my competitors, and I see that they're training, or they're in nice weather, or they're off doing competitions. I understand that in sport there's always going to be some inequity. There's always going to be people that have better facilities or better equipment, better weather.
Would you go even if you didn't have a vaccine?
I think so. I believe that we can and we should get the vaccine before the games. If giving 350 vaccines to athletes that want to go is not going to cause harm to the population or to the communities, then I don't think it should be something that's not talked about.
Damien Warner needs something big right here.
But vaccinating athletes hasn't been an open discussion in this country. The fear of seeming to jump a queue is real. On the worry list as well, what happens with the 2 men who've worked with Warner since they were his high school basketball coaches? They still aren't sure they'll be allowed to go to the games.
Yeah, it's still up in the air. I'm hoping that I get to go. I think it makes a big difference.
Any advantage matters at the Olympics. Canada has seen a lot of success at Summer Games from its swimmers. Fractions of seconds, putting the likes of Kylie Mass and Brent Hayden on the podium. And yet, this is how both of them and other members of Team Canada spent months training for Tokyo. Lucky enough to have access to pools of any kind, if you can count swimming in the snow. Lucky. For a long time, most Canadian swimmers didn't even have this. Former Olympian and coach Byron McDonald has been more than a little frustrated.
What most people don't know about the Canadian swimmers is that they were the most locked out group of swimmers in the world. The swimmers were out 13 weeks back in the spring, summer of 2020. And I know the top American swimmers, several of them, they had access to private pools and they didn't miss a day. The Aussies were out for about 4 weeks. The Italians, the Brits, a little bit longer than that. We were out 13, and that's a long time.
What do you expect the performance consequence of this to be?
The million-dollar question. The one wild card in this mix is they haven't raced in 12 months. So we're going to be race shy going into the Olympic Games. I think it's the only thing that worries me and the athletes and the coaches a little bit.
Quarantine periods have been adjusted for the NHL, for some executives in Canada, but not Olympic athletes. So heading to international competitions hasn't been practical or even possible for many of them.
National Team Canada!
And if it's been hard to wrangle training for individual athletes, spare a thought for the teams out there. The pandemic delay split up Canada's softball team, forced them to train apart to get creative. And while they are excited, worry is they might be rusty. That got tested in a game on the weekend.
Saturday when we played, that was our first real game in 20 months since we qualified in 2019. We hadn't been on the field.
Okay, that's crazy.
It's a long time. When you think we've played softball and pretty much every day of our lives since 5 years old. We've never taken a break. And all of a sudden in the biggest time, in the last push, you're suddenly taking a 20-month break from playing together is pretty crazy.
They're together now in Florida, but watching the clock nervously because softball has an added layer of anxiety to it. This is the first time the sport is back in the Olympics since 2008. A 2020 delay was hard enough, but if the games don't go ahead this summer, that might mark the end for many of them. Training all these years, for what?
We're just constantly on an emotional roller coaster, especially at the beginning when there were just so many unknowns. Right now, we are all systems go. It's happening. Everything's great. So if something does fall apart, it's just going to open up a whole can of worms there.
But 100 days out, until someone tells them otherwise, Canada's athletes are all hope and effort on the road to Tokyo.
Sometimes people think like being a professional athlete is glamorous, and then you come into places like this and see how we're training and compromising.
They'll all be as ready as they can be, uncharted training for unparalleled games. The key now is to make sure they're not just strong enough, but safe enough.